Okay, everybody ready? Places, please. Lights. Camera. And action.
Good evening, Cosmos Creative Television. Whether you are in our live audience or watching on the replay, we greet you and we encourage you to stay engaged. Follow us on all of our socials, and please, please, please comment, reach out. We love hearing from you, and we try to get back to as many of you as possible. If you are in our live audience and you have a question for our guest, just like always, make sure you type it out. And if it's relevant and if we have time, I will highlight it on the screen and our guest might be able to answer. Tonight, we have a treat. This guest has an amazing, amazing portfolio. It is so diverse. She is so multifaceted. We have so much to cover in the next half hour. We're probably going to go a little bit long, up to 40 minutes, I told her. But she is an actress and producer, and she writes, and she's an activist, and she knows exactly who she is. She is a woman of impact. She is someone who, and also a student, a scholar. So we're going to try to get into as much of it as possible. And I encourage you to please, please, please check out her website, which is right up there in the description, and also check out her bio, laurenelizabethharris.com. So I'm going to bring her on so we can all meet her and learn more about who she is and what she's working on and what she has going on in the immediate future. So everybody, give a warm welcome to Lauren Elizabeth Harris.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for being here, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. That intro was amazing. My goodness.
It's not half as amazing as your actual description. Your bio is incredible, and it's all here for people to read, and they can also check out the website. And before you go, you'll tell us how to follow you on social media so we can stay abreast of all of the happenings in your world. I want to start off talking a little bit about how you do it all. So what do you see yourself as when you describe yourself? Because there's so much going on in your life and so much that you are focused on and dedicated to achieving. And you've already achieved so much. So we have actress and producer here, but of course you do so many other things. And you're a podcast host, which I want to get into that as well. How do you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's such an interesting question because I feel like when you are somebody who's interested in, tackling a lot of different things and making a difference, there's always a lot of different paths that you can take to get to where you want to be going. So for me, I grew up acting. I've been acting since I was like 5 years old. I was Stregonona in my kindergarten play. And I always knew that I wanted to be an actor, and that was something that's never left me. But then when you actually get into Hollywood and you start trying to do that, you realize it's so much harder than just, showing up and knowing your lines. Actually getting those opportunities is incredibly difficult. So I think that I sort of picked up all of these other things along the way to sort of just do what I really wanted to do from the beginning, which is to tell stories. So, through starting to write and direct and tell my own stories, I started picking up all of these other titles along the way that allowed me to do what I wanted to do from the beginning, which was be an actor. So I think that that's sort of like the brunt of it. I think if I had to describe myself and like sort of narrow it down, I would say that I'm an actor producer first and foremost.
Mhm.
Those are the things that I'm definitely the most passionate about. But I feel really grateful that all of those other things that I've also been doing have allowed me to do those first two things much better.
Absolutely. And you talked about being a storyteller as well. And as a woman in the industry, and I'm going to say that because this has been my experience as a woman in any industry. I come from the industries of like law, entrepreneurship, and of course, acting, music, entertainment industry. I feel like as a woman, it is so much more important than almost I know that men also need to claim their narrative, but for me, I found that if I don't claim my narrative and portray it very clearly, everyone else is really happy to do that for me.
Oh yeah.
And so storytelling to me has been an evolution where I love telling other people's stories and also changing certain social or political narratives and affecting change, which we're going to get into some of that too, because I know you're definitely on board with that.
Mhm.
But also just finding myself and being really confident about who I am. Can you talk a little bit about being a woman of power, claiming your power in an industry that is still very male driven, and why it's so important for somebody to be very clear about who they are and tell their story?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I feel like when I started getting into more writing, directing, and producing, it was because of exactly what you're talking about. Because when I first started acting, I graduated from USC, studied there, had a wonderful time, but then you actually get into the industry and you're getting roles. I was getting roles that were like hot girl by the pool or,
Right,
kind of
right.
quirky girl next door. And that's those are great, but they're pretty limiting. You don't go to acting school because you want to be hot girl by the pool. You go to acting school because you're
Yes.
interested in Chekhov and Shakespeare and all of the
Hmm.
amazing roles that are out there. So
Thank you.
because of that, I realized like, I if I want to play the types of people that I know I'm capable of, then I'm going to have to start creating them myself. And when I started doing that and when I started claiming my power, I think people started taking me more seriously as a producer. And you mentioned that I'm now in school at Columbia. And
Hmm.
a big part of that was because I knew I wanted to start my production company.
Right.
And my production company focuses on female centric content. So it's all female narrative projects. Seeing women in tons of different facets and tons of different roles. We have 5 features in development now. And that was really important to me because I wanted to find a way to bring people to the screen who were not previously being seen. One thing I would love to do one day is have a mentorship program for women to help them get into the entertainment industry because I think that there's not really a pathway or a textbook on how you can have the perfect career in entertainment. And a lot of people don't have access to a lot of opportunities to provide them into ways into getting into entertainment. So it's really important to me to sort of increase the access that women have to entering the entertainment industry and start helping them to be taken more seriously once they get there.
Yeah, and that's really, really important. And I want to ask about your mother's influence on you,
Mm,
because there are two types of women I've found in my career, and this tends to resonate with a lot of women, which is that there are some women that see themselves more as gatekeepers, and there can only be so many women, so they almost are limiting or very competitive against other women in the same industry. And then there are women like yourself who say, no, I want to open doors for other women. I want to create equality. So talk a little bit about your dynamic with your mother and how that played a role. And, have you noticed this dynamic that I'm talking about where some women are not really there to support one another?
My mom is the absolute coolest, and I'm sure she'll listen to this. So I'm not just saying that for her benefit, it's the
Yeah.
truth.
Hi, mom.
My mom, when I was, I think, 6 weeks old, and I'm sure she'll fact check me on this, she took me on her Fulbright scholarship to Sweden with her, where she taught political science in Sweden. And I was, like an infant, and just with her as she was doing this, and it was just the two of us, but because she always has put her career at the forefront, she was like, yeah, I have a baby, but I'm also still going to take my Fulbright scholarship. I'm not going to let that stop me. And then,
Mhm.
many years down the line, she ended up running for Congress herself in the most gerrymandered district at the time, still getting the party's nomination. And my mom is definitely somebody who's not afraid to take risks. And it was funny. I would say that like one of the most important lessons I learned from her was right before she ran for Congress because I had just started college. I was in California and she called me still in Pennsylvania to say like, "Hey, I would really like to run for Congress. What do you think of me doing this?" And I was like, "You can't run for Congress. Like people are going to say bad things about you. Like,
Mhm.
running for Congress is like a hard thing. Like you're going to put yourself in front of everybody. You can't do that." And she's like, "But I want to make a difference and I
Yeah.
want to help people and I want to show people that somebody like me, someone who was a single mom, can do something like run for Congress." And I think that was an important lesson for me because I, at that time, was like, taking a risk like that is so scary. And I think I needed to see somebody who was fearless in taking that kind of a leap.
Yeah.
So my mom is definitely the type of person who brings up people with her and, you know, sets a standard for women in that you can do anything. And I think for me, that was really important. And especially when I was deciding to pursue a career in the entertainment industry, to just bring on that, yeah, I will get rejected. And yeah, it's going to hurt, but that's okay. And I'm going to keep going attitude.
Yeah, and you talked about risk aversion and risk acceptance, and that's such a key factor in success wherever somebody is, right?
Yeah.
So your mom is exemplifies that, where she's like, "Yeah, I know it's risky, and I know that there's going to be rejection." And you know, when you talk about acting, you're talking about rejection, rejection, rejection.
All the
It's a,
time.
you know, when people say to me, "Oh, actors are so egotistical," and I'm like, actually, actors are really, really level-headed about their strengths and weaknesses. They know how to brand themselves. They know how to. I mean, you know, you go up on stage or screen and you put it all out there. You are in a
Mhm.
vulnerable position and you are tapping into your deepest vulnerabilities. It's incredible. I love how you talk about your mom. So your mom is obviously a scholar, correct?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I know scholarship is important to you too. My mom is a professor, and to me, I always knew I was going to go and get degrees and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people in our industry sometimes either don't respect that as much or it's phasing out. But for me, I feel like when you're training and you're in a collegiate or an academic setting, it's a way to focus, and it's
Yeah.
something that I think is very grueling. Can you talk a little bit about your degrees and why scholarship is so important to you and how you intersect that with the arts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to USC for acting, which I absolutely loved. It was my dream school. So I felt incredibly lucky to have been able to go there. And then afterwards, when I started professionally acting and I was writing, directing, and producing, I felt like, okay, I've made this film. It's gone through the festival circuit. Now what happens? Like, what do you do with the film? And I started being really curious on like what happens in the distribution film field. And as you mentioned, my mom was a PhD. She had gotten her master's and then her PhD. So education has always been something that's been very important to our family. And she
Mhm.
was a college professor for 25 years.
Yep.
So I had always been somewhat interested in getting my master's degree, but at the time I was like, do I want to get something in acting? Like, what would this look like for me
Mhm.
and what I want to do? And because I had started creating my own content, I was super interested in producing. And I also felt like that was something that sort of like complemented my acting career really well because it was allowing me to actually have a say in the projects that I was making and the roles that
Mhm.
I was taking on in a way that directing, you know, does give you, but producing, you're sort of the one that's bringing the project to life. So that was when I decided to go get my master's in producing, which I have absolutely loved. It's been a truly a life-changing decision for me because I really got the skills to develop my own production company. I didn't start it until I was already at Columbia. And then
Mhm.
I've just made amazing connections since I've been there. My best friend in my program is a DP who I've constantly learned from, director of photography, if anyone doesn't
Mhm.
know. So the one holding the camera.
Right.
And that was amazing for me. And you know, definitely been challenging balancing being in school while still full-time acting, producing, and
Yes.
hosting my podcast. But I would say to people, like, don't let the time commitment be something that stops you because if you're so passionate about this career, then you
Mhm.
find time. You know, I'm not proud of myself. I go to bed at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
I don't sleep that much, but it's worth it to me because I'm doing something that I really care about. And you know, I'm about to actually take a lead role in a feature that I'm going to be shooting at the end of the month. And my program was incredibly kind about it because they want you to have opportunities, they want you to succeed. So I think that if you are creating the path that you want to be on, you'll find a way to make everything work out for you if going to school is something that's important to you.
Absolutely. And that's been my experience too. And then you also studied acting
Mhm.
correctly, you know, correct. So I do know actors that, you know, have not studied and they are very gifted and stuff. For me, since when I was 2 years old, again, I get a lot out of the classes. I get a lot out of the Stanislavski method, even more recently, Michelle Danner and her school
Mhm.
in LA. I mean, I'm still learning techniques. Laurence Olivier was in acting school his entire career, his entire life.
Right.
So what would you say to an up and coming actor who was like, I don't need to spring the extra $200 for an acting class or $800 for an acting class? For you, is that a good investment to actually study acting and to take it seriously as a craft?
Oh, absolutely. I think I would be nothing without the classes that I've taken. They have
Me
made
too.
me so much better. And I mean, I even think about like the person that I was before going into some of these programs, and I just was so much less specific. I didn't understand about honing a character, about building their backstory and really living their life. And I've had some really incredible opportunities besides being at USC and Columbia. When I was in LA, I took classes at Leslie Kahn and Margie Haber, Ivana Chubbuck Studios. And
Mhm.
those classes, I think that it's important to take a little bit from everywhere. You're not going to be the best
Mhm.
actor just by going to one program, but
Yep.
by learning something and finding something that works from you in each of the different schools, you'll build the person that you want to be and the actor that you want to be. For this role that I mentioned that I'm going to be shooting at the end of the month, I I'm on every page for about 95 pages. So I really had to find like who is
Yeah.
this person to me and how are we different from each other, right?
Mhm.
And I've been coaching with Leslie Kahn because right now, since I'm taking my classes from my master's program, I don't have time to be in an acting class that's weekly because of my other
Right.
classes.
Yeah.
So instead, I'm coaching, and that's something that works really well for me. I'm going through and picking out like these are the scenes that are really difficult for me. So I'm going to work on these with my coach. And, honestly, they just allow you to be so much more specific. And one of the reasons that I think diversity is so important is because it's just amazing to have so many different voices on anything that you're doing. And I think that's why going to class and coaching and all of that sort of stuff just makes you so much better because you need to
Mhm.
have somebody else's opinion on the work that you're doing because there's no way that you're going to be the person who's right about everything.
Yeah, and it's really hard to be, I mean, when we do, for people who haven't taken acting yet, if you start going in, they're going to do branding exercises with you. This is a
Hmm.
chance for you to be reintroduced to yourself the way the world sees you. And sometimes it's a little shocking, to see how other people, and you sort of have to work with that raw material. And like, I love how you talk about building. It's almost like you are building yourself. You're building your
Yeah.
brand. You're building your persona. You're building who you are. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's a very bold and brave profession, and it's an amazing, but if you love it and you're passionate like you are, you said since the age of 5 you knew you wanted to go in this direction. It is so rewarding to follow your dreams. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about this role. Do you want to talk a little bit about this role and the upcoming feature that you have? When are you shooting, where are you shooting, and like talk a little bit more about that role?
Yeah, absolutely. So the role that I'm about to play towards the end of the month, her name is Anna Summers. It's a wonderful project called Your Vote Matters. It's going to be coming out during election season. My character, Anna, she owns a jewelry boutique in upstate New York. She sells clothes and handbags. And basically, she decides that she's tired of the crime that's happening in her town because her store keeps getting robbed. And she decides that, okay, I'm going to make a difference on this issue and I'm going to run for mayor of my town to put an end to the crime. Through figuring out why this crime is happening, she realizes that there's a drug problem in her community and she decides that she's actually going to figure out if she doesn't win for office, that instead she's going to build a drug rehabilitation center in her town. So it's an incredibly rewarding role. It's completely
Yes.
different than the roles I told you that I was taking on when I first came to LA. So I'm very lucky that I'm able to, take on these people. It's actually the first role that I've had that doesn't have a love interest. So that's something that I'm very excited about.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I love not being somebody's girlfriend or somebody's wife on this one, so that's very exciting for me. The other role that we were talking about is my project. That one is called Friends Wanted, and that one is something that I wrote, directed, produced, and starred in. The amazing Jodie Benson, who was the original Little Mermaid, she plays my mom in it. That should
Isn't
be
that
making its
cool?
way.
The
Yeah.
original Little Mermaid plays her mom in it. That is
Uh-huh.
so cool. And that's there in the description too, guys, if you want more information. But yeah, talk about that experience a little bit, how exciting that is.
Yeah, I was a huge Disney princess person growing up. I had a Disney princess headboard in my room. So to be able to say that, I worked with the original Ariel and she got to be part of my world, that was a really exciting experience. Actually, in the film, a little spoiler alert is that we have a little mermaid drawing at some point in the film that if you look really closely, you can spot it. So
Oh,
it's a
that's
little
cool.
Easter egg.
Little Easter egg
Yeah.
there. Okay. Well, that's a really, it sounds like a great role for you, especially given that your mom, went into politics and
Mhm.
sort of, so are you talking to your mom about the role a little bit? Or are you drawing on her persona?
Oh, yeah. So my mom read the script and she loves it. She couldn't be
Hmm.
more excited about this. And it's funny because, I am not producing this, I'm not writing it, I'm not directing it. I'm solely acting in it. So it's funny because it's so aligned with who my mom is and what
Right.
my family did growing up. So I guess it's just sort of a full circle fate moment in that way. But like I was saying when I was talking about the different classes that I took and how I've been preparing for the role, I've been looking a lot at how me and my character Anna are different from each other. And
Right.
in ways where I'm very sensitive about what people think about me and not offending somebody, Anna is totally fearless in those situations. And for her, doing what's right is so much more important than what people say about you. So I feel like I am in such a lucky position because I'm getting to learn from her and say,
Mhm.
like, okay, in the ways that she's fearless, how can I bring that into my own life too? So it's
Exactly.
really been a great experience.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I love when a character, a role that you're playing is actually educating you and you
Yeah.
can assimilate that into your own character. That is incredible. I wanted to highlight what David just said here because he said, I imagine taking the classes, the acting classes, and learning all the technical bits that might go into a role helps with the taking the criticism later because you realize the complexity of it all even more. So it sort of prepares you. And yeah, definitely. I mean, what's your experience there?
Yeah, I think that's so true. Actually, from what you were talking about with learning about branding, I remember in one particular acting class I was in, people told me that I came across like a lawyer, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I was maybe like 24, 25. I was like, I can't be a lawyer. But it was because I was wearing a blazer, right? So it's
Right.
interesting the way that people perceive you. And it can be something that's like totally just what you're wearing that day. Or if you didn't have time to brush your hair that day, that they view you differently, you know? So
Right.
I do think it's really interesting because even if like the brand or how people see you that one day, you can always shift and adjust that. And I think by going to so many different classes and taking on so many different types of thinking, the one thing that you can really take away from all of that is you're getting so much experience in learning how to take a note as an actor. You're getting so much experience on having your
Yeah.
acting criticized because the most important thing when you show up to set is being okay with the notes you're getting. You
Yes.
really can't be so baked into your performance that you're not malleable when you get there. So I think that the classes and learning those technical bits, just as you said, David, they're vital because you need to say, okay, I know how to do all of these things. So if the director is telling me to adjust something about my performance, it's not a reflection on me or a reflection on who I am as a person. It's just getting me to change something about the performance that I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's so important that you highlighted how just one little thing, having your hair unkempt or having different pair of glasses or wearing glasses or
Yep.
not wearing glasses, these things change how the world interacts with you, what they think about you. And that's another great part about being an actor is you can sort of like put on different masks and
Right.
see which different worlds you want to live in. Now, we are just emerging from the writer's strike. We are just emerging from the actor's strike. It's kind of a new world now where a lot of the younger generation particularly they want to be able to just have total control. And I remember even a few years ago, Michelle Danner was telling us all of her acting students, she said, look, I've been in this business for decades, but you cannot be waiting by the phone anymore. You cannot wait for the phone to ring. You have got to create those jobs. You have got to be movers and shakers. And that's, the internet, social media, you exemplify that perfectly. Talk a little bit about why having agency and ownership, you have pathway pictures right now, being able to call those shots, particularly as a woman, but as an
Hmm.
artist, how important it is to sort of own what's going on the screen. Why is that so important to you? And what would you say to other people who are kind of reticent to take that ownership and they still want to wait by the phone?
Oh, it's everything. It's truly life-changing for you because
Yeah.
as an actor, like, you constantly have to wait for somebody to give you a job. It's completely out of your control. And, actually being on the other side of it and having cast a few projects recently, I really learned how it often has nothing to do with your performance. And the sad truth of it is that sometimes the best actor isn't the one that gets the role. It could just be because you're taller than the lead character that's already cast, or
Mhm.
you have a similar voice. I heard that recently about an actor, that they had a similar voice to the character who was already cast. So being able to create your own projects just kickstarts your career. It just gives you the opportunity. It gives you footage because you're choosing the roles that you're playing. So you're going to know, like, okay, these roles are going to sit really well in my reel because I created them, and they're roles that reflect me really well. So it's super important. My company, Pathway Pictures, we help first-time filmmakers and newer filmmakers to get their projects off the ground, because that was something that I saw that was really missing from the industry. There's production companies that will come on once you already have a ton of financing, but I wanted to help people to start creating their projects when they didn't know where to turn for financing, or they were just on GoFundMe. So that's what my company does, is to just sort of be that support for filmmakers while they're trying to get off the ground and get their project off the ground. Because I think that, especially for actors, and I work with a lot of actors who are now first time directors,
Mhm.
they need somebody who's going to say, like, this is how you do your SAG paperwork. This is how you
Yeah.
build a breakdown on Breakdowns Express, because nobody's teaching you that thing in acting
Mhm.
school. And now, just like you're saying, having these opportunities, it really does just make or break your career, because otherwise you're waiting for the phone. And here's the thing, once you make a project, you send it to film festivals, you go to the film festivals, guess who you're meeting with? Guess who you're there with amazing writers and directors who you can then make connections with, who you can then be in their projects later on. A director of a project who I was an actor on, I later became her associate producer. Actually, Sassy Moen, who I believe was on
Yes,
here.
I love
Yes,
Sassy. She's amazing.
Sassy is my very good friend, and
Oh,
she
awesome.
cast me in her project out of 5,000 actors, I believe she had submit, right? She
Uh,
cast me. We ended up becoming very close on the set. Because of the press things that I was doing on the project, I ended up becoming an associate producer. This was before I started my company. And now we're in the development phase of a feature that she's written and hoping to direct later on. So my point
mhm.
is just saying, like, you have no idea where these relationships that are going to change your life
Mhm.
will come on later on. So just start creating things, start putting yourself out into the world, because that's what creating your own content does. It's, as long as you're not creating it and letting it sit there and you're showing it to people,
Right.
you will meet people and people will start seeing you.
Yeah, and you can't be hypercritical and a perfectionist. And I know a lot of artists who are so brilliant, both in music or producers and or writers, and it's like they won't share it almost ever because they're like, no, 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 I'm still working on it. They could be working on it 17 years, and really, like, done is better than good. Like, just put something out there. It's always going to have some flaw that you find in there, but
Yeah.
someone else is going to resonate with a part of it that you might not even be proud of, a part that you're like, oh, I hated that part, but somebody else, it's going to, there's 8 billion people on the planet. It's going to
Yeah.
resonate. So Lily May, who's in the audience right now, she just turned 16. She is a performer. She's a songwriter. She's a singer, a musician from Las Vegas. And she's also a show host. And she said this. She said, I was taught from a young age to be mindful of the media image you create for yourself, because that is how you will be perceived by the public. And she's 16, so she's growing up with social media, whereas, like, I was introduced to social media when I was already an adult. Um, Talk a little bit about that, about social media, leveraging social media for your career.
Yeah, social media is everything these days, because it's the way that people get their first impression of you. So I completely agree with you, Lily. I think it's incredibly important to be careful of what you're presenting, and also curate the person that you want to be perceived as. On my social media, I post a lot about the films that I'm doing and the projects that I'm doing and the festivals that I'm going to, because for me, being an actor producer is what I want to be doing. So that's who I hope to show to the world. And I also think, talking about what you believe in and talking about what's important to you, I think, when we are trying to be so careful about the image that we're creating, sometimes we're afraid to also be ourselves. But I do think it's important to make sure that social media is reflective of who you are. So I don't think it's a bad thing to post a picture of you with your dog or with your friend, because people want to know that you're a real human, right? So, and actually, Renee, I had something to add to what you were saying previously about talking about projects. I love to use the analogy when people are afraid to release their project or send their screenplay out. One thing that I love to talk about is that you have a garden, right? And you've put so many different seeds in your garden. and you have no idea what's going to spring up first, right? So make
Mhm.
sure that you're watering all the seeds in your garden because you have no idea what's going to be the plant that turns into a beautiful flower, right?
Right. That is such a beautiful analogy, and I could see I'm
Mm.
a visual person, so I just
Yeah.
instantly saw that. That is so true. And there's another thing. One of my friends, Olive Chiachia, she's an actress, and she said, you know what? She said in LA, she said, I've never met anyone who didn't make it. It just takes longer for some people. So, but if you never give up, you will eventually make it. It's just about
Yeah.
like literally doing it. So that's what you're talking about, is this work ethic. Like, get everything out there, just keep producing and keep networking, because you never know what's going to be the alliance or the project that puts you on the map. And most people will say that they're surprised. It's very
Yeah.
hard to predict. And you talked about authenticity, and I'm talking about, predicting like which thing will go forward. Talk a little bit about getting ahead of the curve, as opposed to, like, some people they'll see a trend and then they'll
Hmm.
say, okay, I've got to create something in line with that trend. By the time you've produced that trend is long gone. So talk a little bit about being authentic, doing what you're actually passionate about, satisfying yourself, and why that's really important, instead of trying to project onto an imaginary audience. Okay, I think they'll like me more if I imitate this other thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually have an example of this, exactly what you're talking about. So Columbia creates a lot of like independent projects, a lot of elevated type content, things that you really have to think about to understand. And I love that kind of content. And I'm so happy that I get to learn from the amazing people that I'm in school with. But for me, I joke that I make films that are for the girls, right?
Yeah.
And the Friends Wanted, the project that I most recently made with Jodie Benson, is actually about my time in Quaker school. So I spent 14 years in Quaker school in Pennsylvania. And I really wanted to do something that was about bullying and a coming of age story, and something that's, fun for people, but also talking about a really pivotal point that everyone has experienced in their lives. So my project is, the Razor phone era and the Juicy Couture, Y2K, that sort of thing. Because for me, this was something that I experienced, and I wanted to do something that sort of was an homage to the little girl that I was once, and something
Mhm,
that allowed her to be seen. So, in
mhm.
this project, like, there's scenes of me accidentally cutting off my bangs and coming to school with this like sort of wacky little haircut, right? And it's not the type of role that I usually get cast in, but it was something that I felt like was missing from the marketplace right now. And
Mhm.
instead of, following the trend of other projects that I see coming, or, playing the roles that I typically get cast in, I did something that I wanted to do, right? And does that mean that it's going to be successful? No, it doesn't. But it was really fulfilling to me. And for me, it was a really great, full circle moment that I talked to you that I loved Disney princesses. I got to have my
Good.
mom be one of the original Disney princesses. So I think that sometimes, like, you can't think of your art as, okay, I'm creating this so that I can get an agent or a manager, or I'm creating this
Yeah.
because I want it to be picked up by a production company. You have to create the art that's meaningful to you, because that's what's going to be the thing that makes you the happiest and makes you the most fulfilled as an artist.
Yeah, and that's sort of like social climbing or phony sort of wannabe
Mhm.
thing. It's a turn off. People who have been in the
Yeah.
industry for a long time, they have this spidey sense. They pick up on it, and nobody wants to be, because those people sort of, they feel that they sort of drop off anyways. They're not in
Yeah.
it for the love of the art. They're not in it because that's a passion they had when they were 3 years old. This is something that they think is a get rich quick scheme, or it's just
No.
not. That's not what it is, at
Mm-mm.
all. It's interesting because our 16-year-old in the audience, who's a show host, she said that she's been trying to get an interview with Jodie since season one of her show. So that's, you have a fan. So Jodie has a fan in the audience here.
I'll let her
Um,
know.
let her know that Lily May has been trying to.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And we have another show host, Pano Rea, she has her own channel and platform, and she has shows here as well. So I wanted to use that to segue into your podcast. And what is it like being a show host, putting together a podcast? Because it's a unique skill. It's not
Oh,
the
yeah.
same as acting. It's not, you were recently interviewed by Dennis Tardon for Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation. And I said to him, what did you talk about? Help, so he was helping me before this too. And he's been in broadcasting now since 1979.
Yeah.
And I said to him, he just gets on there, and for him, he has the training and he's just there. For me, this is something that it's not acting, it's not music. It's like, it's its
Hmm.
own thing to interview someone or to have a show. So talk a little bit about your learning curve with podcasting, and also remind people how to follow you there and to check it out.
Yes. Well, thank you for asking. My podcast is called Damsels in the DMs, and it's on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, as Damsels in the DMs. And we discuss come up stories with creatives. So we want to hear about the challenges that made them who they are, what they did to get to what they're doing. And, we ask them specifically, it depends on who the guest is, but maybe they have gotten into really wonderful film festivals. We just recently had on Maria Sokor, who had films at Cannes and in Venice. And we talked to her about, like, what did you do with those films? How did you get into those festivals? Were you targeting those specifically? So it's incredibly rewarding because I get to talk to creatives just like you do and learn from what they were doing. And I think for me, the learning curve was just, how do I have, like, my personal information that everybody can listen to weekly, right? Like,
Hmm.
how much of myself can I bring to this? Like,
Hmm.
who am I going to be when I do this? And I think for me, that was something that, like, I had to get over with, that, like, if I want to be authentic with my guests and if I want to hear their personal stories, that I have to be honest with my personal story too, right? So
Hmm.
we talk about the successes of the industry, but we also talk about the hard parts too. Like, how difficult the strike was and how the
Right.
pandemic could be really stunting for a lot of people in their growth within the industry. So there was definitely a learning curve, and I did a lot of therapy around it. I'm a big proponent of therapy.
Yes.
Um, so for me, I ended up just focusing on the conversations that I was having with people. And when I am at my best, I think, as a host, then I'm just listening really well.
Hmm.
And, just having a conversation with them like I would if we were at a networking event or at a bar.
Right, right. I think listening too, because that's acting. People, it's
Yes.
acting and listening, listening, listening. And I think that's a skill that is so vital for any conversation you're going to have. But absolutely, if you're going to be interviewing someone, you want to highlight them. So I think that's great, great, great advice. Somebody had asked if you could weigh in just a little bit. And we'll try to do this as the last question because we're already a little bit over time. But talk a little bit about body positivity. You work with a lot of women. You are a woman in Hollywood. This is such a body conscious society, everything from the AIs, the filters, the social media. It's really causing a lot of anxiety and stress, and worse, particularly with women and girls. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do think that from my end of the spectrum, it's starting to get a little bit better. I'm hearing less about studios and I'm hearing less about, directors and casting directors asking clients to lose weight, or people who are about to be cast on
Hmm.
a project. I'm hearing more about people being cast and just told to come at themselves, which makes me really happy to hear. So I think people can stop putting so much weight on it. I
Hmm.
actually met with casting director Lindsay Brooks a couple years ago. She's a really wonderful casting director. I believe she does a lot of theater. And when we were meeting at the time, I still had my height and weight on my resume. And at the time, that was standard, right? You had
Oh,
like hair color,
absolutely.
eyebrows.
I
Yeah.
knew all of my dimensions like
Yeah.
all the time. Yes. And
Yeah.
that's not for modeling even. That's for acting.
Oh, for
Yes.
acting, absolutely,
Mhm.
because people wanted to know your size card. People for a long
Mhm.
time wanted to meet in person so that they could make sure that, your size card matched what you look like in person.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes. And
and
just a little
yeah.
thing for men who men may not know, and I saw a model the other day talking about this as well, but women's dimensions change throughout the month even, or the day
Oh, yeah.
even, which men don't even understand that. I mean,
No.
it's really, yeah, sorry. Go on. Thank
No,
you.
no, no. No, thank you for saying that. I completely agree. And what Lindsay was saying was that, like, hey, guess what? We're in the time and day that take off your height, take off your weight, and start
Mhm.
putting your pronouns, right? Like, because
Yeah,
it shouldn't
right.
matter anymore, like, what your height and weight is. It should just be like how great of an actor you are and how much are you inhabiting that character. So I think that it's time to stop letting, like, the way that you think that you should be or the way that you see people on screen, just start coming as yourself, start being who you feel most comfortable as, and don't think about, like, oh, if I were only 10 pounds thinner that I would get this role, and don't
Mhm.
worry about, like, if I worked out more I would be a better actor. It's not true. I've booked roles when I was at my heaviest and I've booked roles when I was at my lightest. None of it matters. It's all
Mhm.
about how are you inhabiting the character best.
Yeah, absolutely. And diversity is not just ethnic diversity. It's not
Yeah.
just even gender. Nowadays they are rewarding. Even a lot of the festivals, even a lot of the awards are going towards diverse casts. And I've
Hmm.
seen a lot. So we're making some progress there, and I'm hoping that we continue down that path. So this has been fantastic. Everybody has loved it so much. We also want to greet everyone who's watching this on the replay. Thank you so much for being
Yes,
here.
thank you.
People are going to want to stay in touch with you. They're going to want to check out all of your projects. What is the best way for them to ethically stalk you, as we say here on the network? It's called ethical stalking. How can they do that, Lauren?
You can follow me on Instagram at Lauren Elizabeth Harris. That's one T, or sorry, one H between Elizabeth and Harris. They share it. Or you can follow me on laurenelizabethharris.com or Damsels in the DMs. We have episodes weekly. So thank you so much for having me. This was absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And everybody go and check her out, follow her, and and we'll be on touch. We'll be in touch as well. And she has like I mentioned, Dennis Tardon recently interviewed her. So that's going to be on Tardon Media's YouTube or tardonmedia.com. As soon as that's published, you're going to be able to check it out. So make sure you're following over there as well. So thank you again, Lauren, and have a great evening or morning, wherever you are, whenever you're watching this. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.